Hi, this is Gary with MACMOST.com. Let me show you how to display zeros as blank cells in numbers and other formatting tricks. MACMOST is brought to you thanks to a great group of more than 1,000 supporters. Go to MACMOST.com/Patreon. There you can read more about the Patreon campaign, join us, and get exclusive content and course discounts. So this is actually a pretty common question I get. Sometimes in a number spreadsheet you want to have zero values represented as a blank. So maybe a calculation is done or an if statement is used and the result is zero. But instead of the number zero there, you just want the cell to be blank but still perform fine in calculations. Let me show you an example. So let's say you have a spreadsheet like this and you want to have a charge applied but only to prices that are above $10. So you could do a formula like this. You can use if and then click on the cell with the price in it is greater than, or let's say equal to 10. Then we're going to have a 20% charge, so 0.2 times the price. Otherwise we'll have 0. And now if we apply this to all the cells here, we see that these two, since they're under $10, have a 0 there. But what you'd rather have is a blank space. So one way to do that would be to use something else in the if statement. So here in the if statement, instead of 0, we could do just a set of double quotes like that. And that would put blank text there rather than a number. So I'll paste this in. And that seems to work, but there's a problem with that. Let's say for some reason in column C we want to multiply that value by 7. So 7 times the charge there. So you're performing a calculation on the charge. If I paste that in here, we're going to get errors here. Why? Because there's no number there. There's just this blank text string. We want there to be a 0 there so it multiplies correctly or does any other calculation just fine. But we still want it to look like a blank space. So let's go back and change this to be a 0 here. And I will paste it in. And now we have zeros there again. So how can we get those zeros to look like blank spaces? Well, we'll do that using data formatting. So here we have it set to automatic for these cells. I'm going to double click on B there so I select all the cells in column B. Now instead of automatic, an automatic is picking up the currency format because we're using the currency values that are here. We're going to change it to create custom format. And we're going to call this currency or blank. And we're going to put a currency format here. So we want to use a standard number like that. But let's also drag the currency symbol beforehand. And afterwards let's put a decimal amount. I'm going to select that and say yes, show trailing zeros and number of digits is 2. So it would always have 2 trailing zeros. We can see an example right here. So that looks good. But we're also going to add one rule. And the rule is if it's equal to 0, then we're going to display nothing. I'm going to delete what's there. So nothing here at all is going to be displayed. So I'll use OK. And now we can see it applies to all those cells. And these values here, it's still the formula you could see. But since the result is a 0, it's giving us a blank cell. The actual value in the cell is going to be 0. But what it's displayed is going to be blank because we've used that custom format here and there's nothing there. Now if we wanted to, we could edit the custom format and have 2 dashes there rather than blank. And you can see now it displays 2 dashes. Either way, the value here is going to be 0, the result of this function. So if we were now to multiply by 7, like that, and copy and paste it throughout, we can see it actually, just like with currency, carries over the formatting. If we were to change the formatting and force it to be currency here, we could see we get $0. So it is actually picking up that that's 0. 7 times 0 is 0 and that's the result. So this is how you get a blank or some sort of symbol as the displayed thing inside of a cell if the value is 0. You could also use, if less than or equal to 0 or something like that. Now what about errors? We commonly run into problems where we have errors. Like for instance, let's have a bunch of values here and let's say we're going to do division and here's a 0 and you can see what's going to happen here. If I do 7 divided by 4. There. I get the result. But if I paste this in, I get results when there's a denominator that is not 0. But of course dividing by 0 gives me an error. I may think one way to deal with that is to do if, and let's say the value of the denominator is equal to 0, then just put something else there like dashes and quotes, else do the division. And that will work. But there's a better way to do it that'll handle not just this particular type of error but any error. And that is to use if error. And then you put the calculation in here, and then the only other parameter is what to display instead if there's an error. So I could put 2 dashes or maybe 2 exclamation points there. And you can see it puts it there. I could also just leave that blank, just 2 quotes there. So it doesn't display that error message there. It just doesn't do the calculation. And here I could copy and paste that throughout. So if I added another one, you could see it also puts a blank thing there. Even though it is doing the division, it's just resulting in an error. So it's giving a blank space there rather than the error, which would be the result of the division. And you can get pretty creative with this. For instance, here you can go and instead of saying blank or 2 dashes, you do all sorts of things. Like I could put the same deal here as before and just add some extra text like that. So now you could see what it does there. So you can get really clever with the custom formats here. You can of course add more rules if you want. So have something different if it's less than 0 than if it is exactly 0. All sorts of things. A lot of people overlook custom formats and instead try to use conditional highlighting or really complex if functions. But there's really a lot you can do with custom formats, and if you use numbers a lot, you should get to know them. If you liked this video, click the thumbs up button below to let me know. I publish new tutorials each weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out.